Back in October, I made 2 episodes of Plug Plants, all about indoor bulbs. One on hyacinths. Welcome to episode 2 of Plug Plants, hyacinths. And one on paperwhite daffodils. Welcome to episode 3 of Plug Plants, paperwhite daffodils. Well, the hyacinths have been in the boiler house for the last few weeks where it's nice and cold and dark, but I thought it'd be really good to do an update on how all of the indoor flowering bulbs are getting on, because it's time to bring these in and really get them going. Hey everyone, how's it going and welcome back. I've been going all around the house and out into the boiler house to collect together all of my indoor flowering bulbs. And as you can see, I've got kind of a lot this year, and I think it's fair to say I've got a bit of a thing about them this year. The house is going to be absolutely filled, which is going to be kind of cool. Now, recently I posted a couple of videos about how to grow hyacinths and how to grow paperwhite daffodils. If you haven't already seen them, I'll link them up here and I'll link them at the end of the video so that you can check them out if you'd like to. But what I thought would be really good today would be just to have a little bit of a chat about how everything's getting on at this stage. I thought it would be particularly useful if you planted the bulbs around the same time as I did. You can compare and see how your progress is getting on compared to how I'm getting on. But if you haven't already, please consider subscribing, and if you enjoy this video, hit the like button that's just down below this video. It really helps to tell YouTube that people like you are enjoying the videos that I'm making, and I would really appreciate it. But let's kick off and let's start talking about how the hyacinths are getting on. So in my video on hyacinths, I showed you 3 different ways that you can grow them, using bulb jars, using a Kilner jar or a decorative jar just filled with some pebbles, or just using a standard terracotta pot filled with compost. And what's been really interesting to see over the last couple of weeks is how they've developed at different rates, despite all getting the same kind of treatment. Once these were all planted, they went out into my boiler house where it's nice and cold and dark, and I've just left them there over the weeks to really develop. That's what prepared bulbs need, is that little bit of time in the cold and the dark, and they use that time to start to develop their root systems and the shoots. And you can see really clearly here in the glass jars quite how well those root systems have developed. Certainly in this one, it's pretty much all root now. It seems to be a mixture of root and pebbles. It's doing really well. So you're looking for the shoots to get to about 5 centimeters, and then it's time to bring them indoors. This one is absolutely perfect. It's raring to go. So all it needs now is to get some sunlight, to get some heat that it'll get from any kind of indoor room, and it's going to romp away. Within a few weeks, it's going to have nice leaves and a nice flower. What's interesting is that the one in the bulb jar is a little bit further behind. Now they are different types. One's called Jan Boss, one's called Delft Blue, and that's probably the reason why they are developing at slightly different rates. I could put this back in the dark for another couple of weeks, but I'm not going to. I'm interested to see how well it gets on if I bring it in now as well, in comparison to this one. So I'm going to bring it in and we'll see how it gets on. Then the last ones are the ones that are planted in the terracotta pot. They are a good way behind these 2. Now, I had a look underneath and you can already see that the roots are starting to come out of the bottom of the holes of the pot. So I know that they are developing, but the shoots are a lot smaller. So rather than risking it and bringing them in now and maybe them not being as good as they could be, these are going to go back out into the boiler house for another few weeks. I'll check on them as usual every week until the shoots are that little bit bigger before I bring them in. But it's actually not a bad thing, because what it's doing unintentionally is giving me some succession. This is going to be flowering in a matter of weeks. With any luck, so will this. But the fact that these are a little bit further behind means that if I bring them in a few weeks, these will start flowering later on into the new year. So rather than everything being like boom and flowering at the same time, I'm going to have a nice successional spread of flowering all the way through. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is a set of hyacinth bulbs that I didn't mention in the last video. So I bought 3 different colours of hyacinths this year. I bought blue ones, which are called Delft Blue. I bought a kind of cherry red coloured one, which is called Jan Boss. And the other ones that I bought are white ones called Carnegie. The episode that I did on hyacinths was all about how you grow prepared bulbs. And what I noticed on the packet of Carnegie ones was that it didn't say prepared. And no matter how much research I did on the internet, I couldn't find the definitive answer over whether they were going to be prepared or not. So I didn't really want to put them into the episode in case they ended up being a total flop. What I did do behind the scenes though was plant them anyway. So I put one as a test into a bulb jar and the other 5 went into a terracotta pot full of compost. The one in the bulb jar, rather than going out into the cold and dark, has actually sat in my dining room. It's a fairly cold room, it doesn't get used that much. And then the rest of them went out into the boiler house, just the same as with all of the other hyacinths. And I think it's fair to say that they are not prepared bulbs. Look at how much further they are behind. These have barely come on at all. This is the same. Now what is good is they're developing roots. So I know that they're doing something, but they are so much further behind. If you look really closely, you can see that they've got a tiny little bit of a green shoot, but like that's as far on as they are. And I'm not entirely sure what to do. So this is going to be a real experiment on how can you grow indoor non-prepared hyacinth bulbs. I'm going to keep this one indoors. That can be a test. The rest of these, they're going to go back outside, they're going to sit in the cold and dark. And again, just like everything else, I'm going to check them every week, see if they start to develop, and then once they develop, I'll bring them in. Who knows, this could be a spectacular flop, but maybe they'll be successful. Either way, I'll let you know how they get on. Right, that is quite enough talk for one episode about hyacinth bulbs. Let's get on to the paperwhite daffodils. So in the video about paperwhite daffodils, I showed you 2 different ways that I was growing them. The first set, that was 3 bulbs, went into this big Kilner jar filled with pebbles and then topped up with water. The other 5 that I had went into this little basket just filled with compost. And I've got a couple of confessions. So I'm going to start with the first one. And that is that I didn't treat them quite the way I said in the video I would. These ones did go into a nice cool room and you can see how much further they are behind. This, well, I was interested in them and I actually just brought them into my office, which has the radiator on, and I work in there a lot, and you can see quite how quickly they bolted. The second confession is that I talked about trying alcohol and water. I didn't get around to doing that in this for about 10 days, and in that time, and only in 10 days, this really tall one absolutely rocketed. Now when I planted it into the gravel, it already was more developed, but it just like took off really quickly, and now it's flowering and you can see how tall it is. It actually is about 40 centimeters tall. The flowers were lovely, but they're already passing, so this flower's gonna have to go. What I did do though was after those 10 days, I tipped out the water, I made up the water and alcohol mix and I put it in. And it was really interesting then to see, because you can see the rest of the flowers and the leaves are a good bit shorter. Everything that's developing now is stopping that little bit short. The flower spikes are shorter and they're more rigid. So the 2 things that you can learn from this, A, it doesn't kill your paperwhite daffodils, I can prove that. And I think it maybe does work. I think there's truth to the idea that putting a mix of water and alcohol does actually stunt the growth of paperwhite daffodils. I'm delighted. So this is going to have to come out. So I'm going to take it out now with a pair of secateurs because it is past. And then the other thing that these need is just an extra little bit of support. Now, you can support them with anything you want, but I like reusing stuff from the garden. And the way I'm going to do that is using this. These are little twiggy bits of beech hedge because I had to trim some of the beech hedge a couple of months ago. What I did was I just let it dry out, stripped off all the old leaves, and I'm just going to poke these into the gravel. Now, they actually go in quite easily. That bit didn't go in that easily. And what you can then do is once they're in, you can let the daffodils grow through them. Come on. There we go. No. That, folks, is the reality of YouTube gardening. Sometimes things don't always work on the first take, so give me a minute and I'll get these sorted. Ta-da! And it's done, just like that. Made that one look easy, didn't I? What I really like about using little twigs and branches that are collected from the garden is that, as well as being practical and giving your plants the support that they need, they look nice and natural, and it turns it into a really nice little display piece. What's great about using these branches in particular is they're very twiggy and they're very twisted, which means that the leaves and the flowers can really twine in nicely through them, and it will give them good support. Now, the other ones that I grew, these are the ones that were kept in the cool and the dark in the basket. You can see how much further they are behind these ones. This means, a bit like the hyacinths, I'm going to have a nice succession of flowering, but I don't want to leave it as late to get the twigs in to support these, so that's what I'm going to do now. Same as before, I collected together loads of these little twiggy branches that I had trimmed off the beech hedges. The advantage of doing this now is it's a lot easier to put them in, and it's a lot easier to put these into compost than it is to put them into pebbles. So what I'm simply doing is just pushing in the branches into the compost, and they'll form a really nice, strong structure that the daffodils can grow through as they get taller. So now that I'm ready for these to start developing, they're going to come into a nice warm room as well. They're going to start growing, and then, just like these, within a few weeks, we're going to start to get a nice display of the white paperwhite flowers. I gotta say, the scent is really beautiful. I was worried that they were actually going to be a little bit too strong and that I was going to get sick of the fragrance, but I really haven't. I'm delighted with them, and I will definitely be growing these year after year. So, we've talked about hyacinths, and we've talked about the paperwhite daffodils. Not convinced this one's that strong. Gonna keep working on it. There we go. Bear with me while I make these even stronger, because I was aware that as I was talking, they weren't exactly looking the strongest. There we go, that's a lot better. So there you have it. We've talked about the paperwhite daffodils, we've talked about the hyacinths and how everything's getting on at this time of the year. Hopefully, before long, I'm going to have the final video where I can show you everything in bloom, really going for it around Christmas and New Year. So I know that some of you had left me a comment on my previous videos saying that you were growing some of these yourselves. So leave me another comment down below and let me know how you're getting on. Or if you haven't already commented, tell me what you think, because I love hearing from you. I find it really interesting to find out what other gardeners are doing and how they're getting on. And as ever, if you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up. Give me a subscribe if you haven't already, and also hit that bell icon, because that way you'll be notified when I post my next video. And until next time, see you later.